Hi, this is Justin Colletti from Sonic Scoop and Joe Lambert Mastering, and in today's episode of the Sonic Scoop podcast, I'm going to be going into ways to outfit any type of studio for $5,000 or less. And in the process, I think we're going to go through some principles that are going to apply whether you've got as little as $500 to spend outfitting a studio or as much as $500,000 or more. This episode is inspired by today's featured sponsor, Sweetwater. They are having a Win Your Wishlist promotion. And in this promotion, if you go onto the Sweetwater site, set up your own account, and create your own wish list on the Sweetwater website, they are going to have winners where you could win up to $5,000 worth of gear. All you got to do is sign up for a free account, put in your own wish list of the gear you'd really love to have. And if you do that by November 24th, you have a chance to win up to $5,000 worth of gear. There'll be a link in the show notes for this, or in the description on the YouTube version of this, or if you're checking out the audio-only version, there'll be a link to it in the show notes. So definitely check that out and play along at home. Create your own wish list with these same principles, and you have a chance of winning up to $5,000 worth of gear totally for free. All right, let's dive right into it. I'll give a little shout out to Sweetwater and our other sponsors, Sound Toys and Eventide, later in this podcast. But I want to start off with the concept that there's really 4 different types of studios you might be looking to outfit. And $5,000 is actually a pretty good price point to try to get entering into a serious studio that is capable of some professional results. And obviously, you can spend a lot more than $5,000 outfitting a studio, but I think we can do pretty well with that price point. And you'll see how I'm thinking about prioritizing what gear we're going to spend the most money on and the least money on in each of these 4 categories. So really, the 4 primary categories of music or audio studio, in my opinion, are going to be your multi-track recording studio, where you'd have a full band potentially and drums and all that and a bunch of people playing together, and you want to be able to capture it all at once. We're talking about a lot of channels here. That's one type of studio. And that's honestly not the type of studio that most people are going to be building. There's so many great recording studios out there that are probably empty in your city right now that would love to have you book them. And often it's going to be more cost effective to spend some money going into one of those studios when you need to do big tracking sessions, and then take overdubs and other things back to your own music production studio, or you might call it a project studio, an overdub studio, a writing and production room. So this other category of music production and writing room, that kind of thing, is a second category of studio where we have a totally different set of needs and priorities. And I'll be talking about that in a minute. There's also what I would consider a mixing room, where you can be doing predominantly mixing and maybe editing tasks. And again, there's a different set of priorities there. And then last but not least, there is the mastering room. Could you really outfit a workable mastering room for $5,000 or less? I think you might be surprised by what we might be able to do in that department. And we'll get into that in just a second. I'm going to go over here right now to the Sweetwater website. I'll type in sweetwater.com. I have it brought up here already. And I'm just going to start going through each of these and give you my sense of how I would spend $5,000 in each of these scenarios. And hopefully that'll give you a good sense for maybe how you could also prioritize your own purchases. And I'll have some great sample wish lists here for you that you can extract from. Now, when I was getting to this whole thing, the kind of studio I really wanted to open was the multi-track recording studio. And part of me wants to, dive right in on that one. But honestly, I think the most relevant thing to so many of us is more the writing and production and overdub room, where we're going to want a couple of really good, high quality channels and some good monitoring. So the very first thing that I'm going to type in here is actually going to be one of the less expensive things. If you're going for this kind of overdub music production and writing studio, the one place where you can afford to save some money so you can spend more elsewhere is going to be in your interface. And if we only need to do a couple of channels at once, most of the time, I'm going to type in here the Focusrite Claret range. And this, I think, they probably have some of the best values around when it comes to interfaces. You could go even less expensive with their Scarlett range. But right here, the Focusrite Claret 2 Pre, this is $439 interface, not expensive at all, but it's going to give us 2 channels of really good, clean gain. And honestly, at this level, your interface is not going to be your weak point. Mic preamps, and in particular A to D converters, have come so far in recent decades where this is just not going to be your weakest link. And there's two other places that could be your weakest link where I want you to focus on spending some more money. So this 2-channel interface right here for $439, you can add on additional pre's and outboard in the future because it's got more inputs available than just these 2 mic pre's. That would be the first thing I'd be looking at to get it out of the way and just get something that's totally solid, well built. It's going to work really well. You're hearing me talk through one of these right now. Sounds great, really simple, easy to use, and we can save some of our resources for the 2 biggest things I want you to focus on, which I'll get to in just a second. If you were going to spend a bit more on an interface, one of the things I would probably look at would be the Universal Audio Apollos. I'm a big fan of those as well, but that's going to take away some of our budget for those even more important things in this particular studio setup. So for the moment, let's continue on with this one. Absolutely great choice, this Focusrite Claret. Tremendous bang for the buck. To add this guy to your wish list, all you got to do here is hit Add to List. I'm going to put it on my wish list. You can have multiple wish lists going, which I have going right here because there's 4 different types of studios I want to talk about. And then there we go. We can continue shopping. So the next thing that I want to think about after this interface is speakers. And this is something where we're going to spend a little bit more money. We're not going to max out the speakers to the 9s, but we want to get something that's really good professional quality. And there's so many different brands you can choose from, but one of the ones I'm going to look at right now is Atom. I'm a little partial to them, and I'm actually going to be looking at their A series. I think that these would be sufficient for the average music production studio that's trying to put out high quality professional level work. One of the most popular options here is the A7X. This is a best-selling monitor for good reason, but so that we can save a little bit more money for some things that I think are going to be even more important to you, I'm actually going to go down to a slightly less expensive version, the Atom A5X. And this is just a slightly smaller speaker. They're $500 each instead of $750 each. So that's about $1,000 on your speakers. But these are probably some of the best speakers I've used in this price range. And if you spend $750 each on the A7Xs, you're really going to be getting more low end out of them. And on the writing, overdub, music production end of things, I think that the little bit of extra loads you're getting out of that 7X aren't super duper essential compared to the other things that are even more important that we're going to get to in just a second. I love these because not only do they sound great, they're fun to listen to over long periods, and they still have a mid-range that is revealing, but they go pretty deep for fairly small speakers. I mean, there's useful information here around 50 hertz-ish. Absolutely. You can really get a sense for what's going on at the beginning of your subs. These speakers are going to be super useful. There's other brands you could look at, whether it's Dynoed or KRK or Cali Audio or JBL or so many others. This is just one example. I'm a little partial to the feel of Atoms, but that's one great way to go. A good 5 or 6 inch speaker. And this is going to allow us to save some money for what I think is even more important. And that is, in this context, microphones. And this is where we're going to go all out. We saved a little bit of money on the interface. We saved a little bit of money on the speakers without really compromising too heavily. And now we're just going to go for a big Mac Daddy. I'm going to type in a Neumann U87. And this is a microphone that costs, here it is, about $3,200 in the nickel finish, which would be my preference. And this is a microphone where you're really never going to feel like you skimped, or you're never going to be second guessing whether you have a mic that is good enough for the stuff that you're doing in your studio. The beautiful thing about a U87 is if you put in front of a male vocalist, you put in front of a female vocalist, you put in front of whoever, it's just generally going to sound pretty good. And even if the particular vocalist that you're working with could sound even better on some other type of microphone, they're really just never going to sound bad on a U87. It is one of those really super flexible mics. It has enough personality and character to be interesting and to give it a kind of professional sounding sheen without it having a personality that works great in some places and not great in others. And this is a kind of microphone that you could use on anything. You put in front of acoustic guitar, you put in front of a tambourine, in front of a djembe. It's one of those mics where you could literally record everything in your session on it and be in a totally great place. a bit expensive at $3,200, but you're not just going to have to worry about or think about the mic department at all. Now, this isn't the only microphone I'm going to recommend for the space. The other thing I'm going to put in here is a handy-dandy Shure Sm7b, which I'm talking into right now. You're hearing me through a Shure Sm7b into a Claret 2 Pre, and this is the chain I've got going on. I have the two switches on this microphone depressed so that we have a little bit more brightness and articulation coming off it, and you're hearing it really minimally processed. This is just a great all-around dynamic microphone for when you want something other than that nice condenser sound. You've got one of the nicer dynamic mics you can find. So this I would put in front of guitar cabinets, other instruments where you just don't want all the detail that that U87 would be giving you, and in front of some vocalists where you really want a slightly darker and fuller sound with less of that kind of articulation and stuff on top. This would just be a great additional choice to have. So when the U87 isn't working on a vocalist, you use this on the vocalist. When the U87 isn't the right choice for an instrument because you don't want all of the detail and all of that, you switch to the Shure SM7B. Then after that, pretty much all we need is some headphones to do overdubs with, right? So I'm going to put in the Audio-Technica headphones, and these are slightly more expensive headphones that I'm going to recommend. One of the best sellers here, the ATH M50X. They're about $150 for a pair of closed back headphones, but they're just going to be super comfortable, super durable, and good enough to actually make some critical listening decisions on and be a good secondary reference in addition to your speakers. They're inexpensive enough that we can get two of them for those overdub sessions you're going to be doing, and they're not so expensive that we're really maxing out too much budget here. Okay, and now there's just one more thing. I'm assuming in this case that you have a couple of mic cables, you have a couple of mic stands, and we're really just upgrading to a serious professional level studio. And I'm assuming you have a bunch of instruments already. But the one thing that you might want to add on, even if you're not a keyboard player, is a good controller. So I'm going to look at some of the Novation stuff here, just to have a good MIDI controller. This is great if you're doing a lot of collaboration and writing and production with others. We don't have to spend a ton, and probably my choice here would be this Novation Launch Key 49 controller. It's just $169. And it's got pads in here, it's got a kind of sequencer function, it's got some faders on it, it's got the expression knobs, it's got 49 keys, really just tremendous value. That's probably what I would go for, just to have something like that in the studio, even if you're not a keyboard player. You put that all together, and we are just around $5,000. Sorry to say I failed you guys. We're at $5,006. So maybe we should make the second pair of headphones slightly crappier. But you get the sense here. We're at $5,000, and we really have a setup where your interface is absolutely good enough. It's not going to be the weakest link in your chain, and we're not overdoing it on that end. And we're putting some of our resources into two things that I think at this level, at this stage, are going to be arguably more important: having a great condenser and having a good, really good dynamic mic alternative to that, a couple of headphones, and a MIDI controller. And that's really the heart of that music production room. The things that I'm assuming you have taken care of, like I said, are you have your instruments already, you have a room that you're already in, you have a computer that you're already using, you have a laptop that you can do your recording on, or some desktop computer that suits you. And I'm also assuming that you are going to be setting aside some of your own time and resources to do acoustic treatment. That's something that I'm leaving out of each and every one of these studio builds. I would say that in general, for a smallish room, you should plan on spending $1,000 to $2,000 on just acoustic treatment alone to get the room into a great place. But if you got a little bit of elbow grease, you got a little bit of time on your hands, and you have more time than money, which is probably the case for most people trying to make professional sounding recordings for $5,000, then what you've got to do is just do some DIY acoustic treatment. And for a few $100 in materials costs, you can get the equivalent of, $1,000 or more worth of commercially made acoustic treatment. Fortunately, Sonic Scoop has got you covered. We have a whole bunch of great articles on DIY acoustic treatment and soundproofing. So definitely check those out. I'll link to some of those in the show notes in the video description as well. So plan to put in some elbow grease there, but here you are basically covered. Couple quick notes here on the microphone. This is the one place where I think people argue with me the most. They might argue with me a little bit on the interface and say, you should be spending even more on an interface. And sure, you could. And you could spend a little bit less on the microphone. Some people might say, you really need a bigger speaker. You should go for that A7X. And maybe this Neumann U87 is overkill. For those of you who have that to say, I think it's a fair critique, and that is one way we could change this setup. So let's just look at all the condenser mics that are available on Sweetwater's site real quick and go through some of the top choices, some of the most popular ones, and I'll give you my feedback. Looks like one of their biggest sellers is the Rode NT1A, $229. A great microphone for $200. For it being $200, it's hard to do, much better than that Rode NT1A, but it's really not what we're looking for if we got $5,000 to spend and we want to make professional sounding stuff. The Townsend Lab Sphere apparently is really popular on their site. About $1,500. That's a great modeling microphone where it'll sound like so many different other models of microphones. And that actually could be a good solution if you are somewhat more of a future-focused kind of person. I tested this recently just at AES. I had my first experience listening to it, and some of those models are really good sounding, and they really capture the flavor of a bunch of different high-end mics from throughout history. If you're a little bit more old school and you want one mic that's great at doing its sound and maybe a couple different options to choose from, then one of the things that's showing up here is the Akg C 414 XL2. This is an $800 microphone, and I gotta say, the Akg 414, I'm a big fan of these. They are super clean. They have a little bit less of that mid-range push than a Neumann does, so maybe not quite the same kind of character and kind of note that the Neumann U87 has, but this XL2 model has a nice kind of bright shimmer on top, great vocal mic, great acoustic guitar mic, great all-around condenser. And if I was going to get, one kind of neutral, put it on everything condenser, that would be a fantastic one to go with. Compared to the Neumann U87 at $3,200, spending $800 on this, we got a chance to get some other flavors in addition to it. What we could do is spend $800 on this microphone and then look at some of these Warm Audio microphones. Warm Audio, they specialize in making kind of reissues or clones of some of the most expensive, most classic high-end microphones, but doing them at a very cheap price. So the Warm Audio WA47, $800, and it's giving you a U47-ish tone. And they have a whole bunch of models like that. So you could get a really clean, good neutral microphone like that 414, and then experiment with a few inexpensive but great bang for the buck character mics. Warm Audio is a great one to go with for that. Another great brand to go with for that would be Mojave Audio, and I think we'll get to them eventually if we keep on scrolling down on this list. They make some really great character condensers, the MA300, the MA200. They're around $1,000 to $1,200, but those are just some really sweet sounding tube condensers. They've got a little extra sparkle on top. I've heard them described as almost being like a kind of bright sounding U67. That could be a great option. And I know another option that a lot of people love are the Neumann TLM 102 and the Neumann TLM 103. That Neumann TLM 102 is about $700, the TLM 103 about $1,100. Either of those could be a great main mic option. For my personal tastes, I think when you're going for something like the Akg 414, you're getting among the best of that Akg kind of sound, where when you're going for the TLM 102 for a similar price range, you're not getting the best of that Neumann kind of character. And the TLM 102 wouldn't be one of my favorites for $100 less than the 414, but your taste may vary. A great thing to do is to actually try out a bunch of these. We at Sonic Scoop have a whole bunch of great mic shootouts where you can compare a bunch of different microphones to each other. So do a whole bunch of other great websites and resources. And often dealers like Sweetwater will work with you so you can find a way to really try out some stuff in your own studio. Often there's demo units of these mics that you can check out. And sometimes you can even save some money by buying a demo unit of some of these microphones. All right. Let's scroll down this list a little bit more and see what some of the other things are here. Slate also has a digital modeling microphone solution for $800, a little cheaper than that Townsend Labs option. Going down a little further here and onto the next page, I want to see what some of the other good higher end options are here. Yeah, that Mojave Audio MA200 finally shows up on this list, about $1,200. That could be a really good option if you want a character mic for vocals. You could have something like that plus a 414 and just have more options for condenser microphones. The Loudon Audio Atlantis, the Chandler Limited TG, these are some really impressive sounding, nice mics that aren't too expensive. And one other thing I want to shout out there is Telefunken. They have a microphone called the Copperhead that was around for a long time. And when I did an interview with Chris Zane, really big producer engineer, he's worked with Passion Pit and so many other big artists, when he said Telefunken sent them practically everything they make. And what he was really impressed by was their Copperhead microphone. And the most recent version of that looks to be this TF29 or TF39. And he was super impressed with the results he got out of that microphone. So that's another good kind of character mic that's supposed to kind of blend together the signature of a few different, vintage microphones that people really love the sound of. All right, I don't want to eat up all our time just talking about the music production studio idea, but I think you've got the idea and the basic principles here. We'll probably save a little bit of money on the interface so we can max out the microphones and we can get really good speakers that we can rely on. Those are going to be the two most important parts of the studio, aside from any acoustic treatment you might build yourself. The next type of studio we want to think about is the multi-track recording studio, where we're trying to record an entire band. And here again, I'm probably going to save a little bit of money on the interface. We can always upgrade later or add on additional, sweet boutique analog preamps if we want to at some other point. But just for the core of our system, I'm going to look again at Focusrite, just because of how much kind of bang for the buck we're getting there. I'm going to look again at their Claret series if we have this $5,000 price point to spend. And I think the two things I would get here would be this Focusrite Claret Octopre, which is just $700. And this basically gives us an additional 8 channels that we can add on to this Focusrite Claret 8 Pre. So we get this 8 Pre for just about under $800, 8 mic pre's built into this guy and a whole bunch of expandability. Plus, we're going to add on this Focusrite Claret, and we've got 16 channels. And it might not even get us 16 mics to begin with, but this system is going to be really expandable. You can rent additional microphones. You can keep on buying additional microphones bit by bit. Let's be honest, we both know that you're going to. You can even have some of your bandmates or people that you're working with bring in additional microphones for a session if you want to use all 16 channels. But the next big thing we want to look for after this is some speakers. And this is a place where we're going to save a little bit of money. Although I'm a huge evangelist for getting the best speakers you can get your hands on, when it comes to this multi-track recording facility kind of vibe, I think that you can get some really good, affordable speakers instead of maxing out just your budget on those. And there's a lot of tracking engineers who like to track predominantly using smaller near fields. They think they can really focus in on the most important things that are happening into recordings on some fairly humble but still really good and serviceable studio monitors. Two of the options there that would be popular and really inexpensive would be, say, KRK's Rocket series, and you can get something like their Rocket G4 7 inches for just $240 each. So that's like $480 on speakers, and you've got something that has just enough hype to kind of make things sound really fun, so you can kind of hype up the band a little bit and get them feeling like things are really sounding rocking, but they're still neutral enough to be good studio monitors that you're actually going to make critical listening decisions on. I've actually got a couple of them behind me. KRK just sent me some to check out, their new G4 of these, and I was actually really impressed by them. The Generation 4 is a little less hyped than past versions for people in the past who thought they had a little bit too much low end and a little bit too much hype. These are going a little bit more neutral, but they still have some of that fun, impress the clients, make them feel happy signature of the KRK while being still more neutral and even better for critical choices. I think there's also one of my Atom A5Xs is on top of that stack. I'm a true believer. They're great tiny monitors. But for this application, $480 on a pair of KRKs is going to allow us to save some money for the most important thing here, which is going to be a whole bunch of microphones. All right. There's also alternatives you could look at. Colletti Audio is going to be an absolutely great bet for speakers. Their LP6s, these are $150 each, so $300 for the pair, and they are probably some of the best affordable 6-inch speakers. They're really focused on being as neutral as they can be at that price point. So that would be a wonderful way to go. You could save even a little bit more on speakers that way. This one I'm really impressed by. I just got a set of these from Colletti Audio. They sent me in this new In 8-inch. This is a 3-way speaker, and these are about $400 each or $800 for the pair. So if you really wanted to amp things up a little bit in the speaker department, I might be inclined to go for these Collettis or some Atoms in that, $800 to $1,000 price range. But for right now, I'm going to put those KRKs on the list as a good kind of median low price point. We'll still get some great speakers we can make decisions on. And the next thing I'm going to start searching for is my mics. All right, so I put together my little wish list here. The microphones that I put on here is a Shure SM57. You got to have at least 2 of these, right? At least one on your snare drum, at least one on a guitar amp, maybe 2 on guitar amps. But the other things that we have in addition to the SM57s, I put down one of these Akg C 414s. And again, that would be our great neutral all-around condenser microphone that we can kind of put in front of anything. You put it in front of a vocalist, you put it in front of an acoustic guitar. It's got great neutral, clean mid-range, a little bit of extra sparkle on top. And if you want to add some additional character beyond that, you can with some additional processing. And we're not blowing the budget on our one good condenser, so we still have a little bit more money left where you can get some additional character mics of your choice. I also have on here the Sennheiser drum mic pack. This is $1,000, but it is coming with, let's count them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 microphones. And this bass drum mic in this pack is really one of my favorites. I'm a big fan of using a Sennheiser MD421 on kick drum, but this kick drum mic in this series sounds like a Sennheiser MD421 inside a kick drum after I've EQ'd it. Like it's got exactly some of what I'm looking for on it. And I know some really good producer engineers who swear by some of these Sennheiser kick drum mics. Joel Hamilton, I know he's a big fan of the Sennheiser dynamic mics for inside a kick drum. And I actually did a 3-part video series on recording drums. It's got over 500,000 views on it. And we use nothing but a Sennheiser drum mic pack to record this video. We did in a super nice studio that had a whole bunch of nice high-end Neumann condensers and stuff. And in one part in the video, you can actually hear this mic pack compared to a whole, high-end Neumann-only mic setup, and it stands up really, really well. People really like the drum sound that we were able to get out of these simple microphones. They're not the cheapest available. If you wanted to go even less expensive, Shure makes some good drum packs. My preference would be for the Sennheisers. Some other options here, Telefunken makes a really nice drum pack for a little bit more money. That was about $1,200-$1,300, as does Audix. I know there's some drummers who are really into kind of more of a metal sound who really like the Audix stuff. They're also really popular in kind of house of worship applications. And the Telefunkens are probably really popular with people who want a little bit more of kind of an organic, rootsy sound, people who are recording, jam bands and jazz, and people who really want to get a feel of being in the room with the band, but in a way that has some kind of that old school Telefunken character. So all great options, but I'm going to put down the Sennheiser here as my preference for $1,000. And then our other big thing here is headphones. And I put down 4 of the Sennheiser HD 280s for this, just because they are stupid durable. They're hard to break, which is great when you have a whole bunch of band members coming in. They're good sounding headphones. They're headphones, honestly, that I like the sound of much better. They're headphones that I like the feel and comfort of much better. But for around $100, this is really one of your best bang for the buck headphones, where they're not going to break on you constantly and you have to replace them all the time. They're going to give you sound that is good enough for a tracking situation with great isolation, minimal bleed, where musicians really feel like they can hear themselves through the headphones without spending a ton and not having to worry about them. With all that put together, our one nice high-end condenser, our drum mic pack with our 2 overheads and our tom mics and our snare mics, and then our additional 57s, we're only at $4,100. This leaves you $1,000 left to buy a whole bunch of mic cables and mic stands and get yourself another nice character condenser microphone, maybe. One of those warm audio mics could be a good add-on into this situation. Or if you already have all of the mics and stands, maybe a nice around $1,000-ish mic, like one of those Mojave audio microphones could be a nice addition, or a second Akg 414, or one of those Neumann TLM microphones. So we still got $1,000 left to add on maybe an additional character mic, or maybe all of your cables and stands. All right, we just covered a lot of ground. I think there's still 2 types of studios left to cover, and I'll try to get through these fairly quickly. One of them is going to be our mixing room. And in our mixing room, the 2 most important things for me are going to be my speakers, that should be obvious, and some additional DSP power. So here I'm actually going to spend a little bit more on the interface. And I would look at this point at some of the Universal Audio Apollos. I think the Universal Audio Apollos would make an absolutely great choice instead of those Focusrites that we looked at earlier. But if we only have $5,000 to spend, they're going to make us skimp a little bit on the microphones for those other environments. But here, I really want to have a Universal Audio Apollo interface for the mix room. It could be maybe one of these Apollo twin quads, and then I could add on one of their satellites on top of it so I can get a whole bunch of extra DSP power for mixing. Because the last thing I want to have happen when I'm mixing is to have my computer crashing on me. And one of the first things I want to have for mixing are really great sounding plugins. Because at $5,000 for the studio, let's be honest, we're mixing in the box. So we want some of the best plugins we can find. And I think Universal Audio is going to give you some of the greatest character compressors and preamps and things like that that you are going to find. So the Universal Audio would be a good way to go. The Apollo Quad would be about $1,200, and then we could add on one of these satellites. And we could spend $1,200 getting this octo-core satellite. Or we could spend $1,200 on this octo-core satellite and just get the Duo interface for $800. So maybe we'll spend around $2,000 on interfaces. Then we've got about $3,000 left to spend. One of the things I'm going to look at speakers. Again, I hate to be biased. They're not actually sponsored on the podcast, but Atom Audio probably would be my go-to here. Maybe in this case, I'd be looking at their A77X. This is their 3-way speaker. These are about $1,200 each, so $2,500 for the pair. We're at just about $4,500 between our Universal Audio extra DSP processing and getting into that family of great sounding plugins, plus maybe another $2,500 on these speakers. And I really like a 3-way speaker for mixing. With a 3-way speaker, you're getting one driver that's really dedicating itself more to the low end and another driver that's dedicating itself a little bit more towards the mid-range. And I think that this is really important because when you ask one driver to really handle all of both the bass and the mid-range often gets shortchanged. You can end up with some compression in the mid-range, and what will happen is the mid-range often gets a little bit softened, and you don't hear all of the detail, all of the kind of warts and all of what's going on in the mid-range. And one of the most important things when it comes to mixing is having good mid-range that you can really trust, but then also being informed well enough about what's going on in the top and bottom. So this would probably be one of my choices for this. Again, there's so many great other options here. You could look at Dynoed Audio. Their speakers are really nice if you want a slightly tighter and brighter sound than Atom. There are mixers out there who really love the KRK, V8s. Those would be a lot less expensive than these. Let's take a quick look at what some of the most popular studio monitors on the Sweetwater website. Go to active monitors here, and let's look at things that are $500 to $2,500. You got the Focals here, the Solo 6. This would be a good option. I really like their Trio series. These Neumanns, about $700 each. That's another good option there. The Aventone CLA10, if you're an NS10 kind of person, you can get $1,000 for a pair of NS10 style speakers. So there's a tremendous number of options there. So we're still saving maybe $500-700 left for more plugins. And you could use that on the Universal Audio Store to buy more plugins. But the first thing that I would buy, if I was buying plugins and I did not have it already, would be, and I'm not just saying this because they're a sponsor on the podcast, the Soundtoys 5 bundle, $500. I could not imagine doing mixing work without this thing. You get plugins like the Devilox, the Echo Boy, one of the best delays ever made, the Radiator Saturator, the Decapitator Saturator, so many great tools in here, the Primal Tap Delay. I mean, just go and get the Soundtoys 5 bundle if you don't have it already. I can't recommend it enough. That is probably one of the additional things I would spend some money on if the goal is mixing. And again, I'm not saying this just because they're sponsors. They're sponsors because I love them, not the other way around. All right. The other one I would recommend is a few really fun plugins from Eventide. Again, if mixing is the thing, there are a couple of Eventide reverbs I want at my disposal. I would love to have the whole Eventide Anthology bundle, but we don't have enough of that left in the budget. So a whole bunch of fun things in here, like the Omnipressor is a lot of fun, the Instant Flanger is a lot of fun. But the one or two things I'd really want to get would be the kinds of things that Eventide does that no one else does as well as them. So I think our options here would be the Black Hole, their Eventide Black Hole Reverb plugin, super popular one. That one is $200. Another great one to look at would be their Mangled Verb plugin. I think I can find that one here. And their Mangled Verb plugin is only, let's see, $100. So that would be another great option to have. And both of these are just weird and unusual reverbs that are going to give you sounds that you're really not going to find anywhere else. There are so many great tools here, but if I was just to pick two, it would probably be that Black Hole reverb and that Mangled Verb reverb, just because they're super unusual and super useful. One other one I might look at would be their Octavox or Quadravox plugins. And that would be if you're into doing a lot more kind of processed harmonizer style effects. Their Octavox here is $200, or their Quadravox is just $100 version of that plugin. So that would probably be it for me. I would get either the Black Hole plus the Quadravox, or the Black Hole plus the Mangled Verb, or maybe all three, and that would be a great start to adding some of their sounds in. So I'd have some great Universal Audio plugins to mix with that would come with the system. I would add on the Soundtoys plugins. I would add on a couple of the more unusual and interesting Eventide plugins, and I think that would give me a suite of great tools I'd be super duper satisfied with for mixing. All right, we've covered a lot of ground here. The last thing I want to cover is mastering. Can you set up a mastering studio for $5,000 or less? Well, I'll tell you, here is what I would do. I would spend almost all the money on the speakers, and I'm going to assume that you are doing some DIY elbow grease for that acoustic treatment, just like you are in the mix room and all the other rooms that we were talking about. So I'm probably going to spend almost the entire $5,000 budget on the speakers, and that's going to give me speakers that are going to be better than pretty much any of my mixing clients are going to have, and they're going to inform me of things that no one else who is sending me tracks to work on can hear in their own space. If I have a good sounding room and I've got some speakers that are really a notch above what all my clients have, I can really do them a great service. There's also one tool I'm going to buy. I'm going to assume you're going to need some additional processing if you're doing mastering. So I'm going to put some of our budget right here into iZotope's Ozone. And if you get Ozone 9, the full advanced suite, it's about $500. And you could really master everything just right inside of iZotope's Ozone. In fact, I just did a video about a week ago or two where I remastered 3 tracks that I mastered using other tools, using nothing but iZotope's Ozone 9. And I was able to get great results, getting pretty much all of the way there super quickly, just using Ozone 9 and nothing else. I was really impressed by it. Even when I'm not using Ozone 9 and nothing but Ozone 9 to master, I will still end up using at least some of the modules out of Ozone 9. Their dynamic EQ is super useful to have. Their multiband compressor is one of my favorites. Their stereo imager. There are just some great tools in there for mastering. So I'm going to put $500 of the budget into iZotope's Ozone 9. If you already have that, or if you're covered when it comes to the processing tools that you want and the plugins you want and the hardware you want, then I would still look at iZotope's RX denoiser. That would be a great thing to add on. And then I've got pretty much the entire budget left for my speakers. So once again, I want to go and use the search and filtering functions on Sweetwater's website to narrow this down. We're going over to active monitors. And this time, I'm going to put in a price range where we are going to spend no more than $2,500 per speaker, because that would be totally maxing us out for our budget, and no less than, say, $1,500 per speaker. So we're getting pairs of speakers that are anywhere from $3,000 to $5,000. And let's see what that makes things look like. All right. And one of the first things to come up here is exactly probably the speakers I would buy out of the choices here on Sweetwater. And this is the Neumann KH310 speaker. $2,200 each, so $4,400 for the pair. And there is a set of reasons that these would be the speakers. I think out of all the speakers in their top sellers here, they're going to be the most neutral, and they're going to have the best low-end response. These are actually a sealed cabinet design rather than a ported cabinet design. And the trade-off with sealed cabinet designs is it's hard for them to put out as much and as deep in the low end. So you need to go with an even, bigger low frequency driver, and you might not get as much kind of level out of the low end. But they make up for that problem with having great transparency and kind of resonance-free function in the low end. And this would probably be the set of speakers I would go for to get all the low end that I'm getting be low end that I can trust. And it's a three-way speaker. So we've got a really great tweeter and a dedicated mid-range driver where I can really hear details that my clients aren't. Some of the other options in this price range that are coming up are the Focal Twin 6s. Those are $2,200 for each speaker. So again, same price, $4,400 for the pair. But those Twin 6s, although they are great, they would not be my first choice for mastering, only because they have a little bit more color and a little bit more hype. If I was in a music production room, a writing room, or even mixing, I might really love those Focal Trio 6s, especially music production and music creation. A lot of fun. They put out a lot of level compared to the Neumanns, but they just aren't going to have that same degree of neutrality that I'm going to want in the mastering studio. So great for other environments. Wouldn't be my first choice here. There are some Genelecs here that are just a little less expensive than the Neumanns, but these Genelecs, most of the ones here in this price range are going to be two-way speakers rather than three-way speakers, and I'm really going to like having that three-way speaker. The Adam Audio S2V, another great choice here, as well as the Oceanway, but again, these are two-way speakers rather than a three-way speaker, and I'm really going to want to have that dedicated mid-range driver. We've also got here the Dynoed Audio Core series. This is their newest series, $2,500 each, or $5,000 for the pair, and they're going to have quite a bit more level. The total power on these is a lot higher than the Neumanns. One of the great things you can do here on the Sweetwater site, click on any of the speakers, and then we get a little summary here that compares things. So we got 290 total watts of power on this Neumann compared to 400 watts coming off the Focal Twin. And I believe that Dynoed Audio Core might have even more power than that. So the one trade-off with these Neumanns is they're not going to be the loudest speaker in this price range. But for mastering, I really think that's okay. It's not about blowing them up to impress the clients. You're probably going to be doing most of your listening, particularly in a smaller room, between maybe 78 dB and maybe a high of 83 dB. You really want to set kind of median volume level that you're doing most of your loud monitoring at. And I think these are going to be plenty loud for that and plenty neutral. One last thing that I might throw on would be some headphones for a double check, assuming that since we're not in a mastering studio where we spent $20,000 in our speakers and another $20,000 on the construction and the acoustic treatment, I want just a double check for low end. And if I have a few $100 left here, it might be over budget already, I might add in these blue MixFi headphones. And the thing that I love about these MixFis is at $300, they are not the most expensive headphones out there, but they just have really great, useful low end for a $300 pair of headphones. You can actually get usable sub-bass information that's not totally hyped up, but is really in focus, and it'll just work as an additional good double check of the low end where you can see what's going on down there and just get you more information than your clients likely have when it comes to the low end. I was really surprised by these, but I just recently did a shootout of all of the nicest, most high-end headphones out there, and these got really high marks from me on the quality of the low end coming off of these guys. All right, that's about it. 4 different types of studios, $5,000 only, 5 great solutions. Thanks again to Sweetwater for sponsoring this episode. If you want to play along at home, you can win up to $5,000 worth of gear by entering their Win Your Wishlist promotion that's going on right now. Just go into the video description if you're on the video version, or if you're listening to the audio only podcast. I'll put that link in the show notes. It'll take you right to where you can set up an account and a wish list on Sweetwater. It's absolutely free to enter. To satisfy your fantasies by putting in your $5,000 worth of favorite gear, and there's a chance that you could win it. Big shout out and thanks again to Sweetwater, and every single piece of gear we talked about today is available on the Sweetwater website. Another thank you to our other 2 sponsors on this episode, Eventide and Sound Toys. They are honestly 2 of my favorite creative plugin makers out there, and I put their plugins into my wish list for good reason, especially in that mixing bundle. I absolutely want to have them be part of that. So one last shout out to our big featured sponsors this week at Sweetwater, and also to Sound Toys and Eventide. Thank you guys for hanging out with me. Do you have any questions, any things you want to quibble about, or any pieces of gear that you think would be even better choices? Let me know about it in the comments down below if you're hearing the video version, or if you're listening to the audio only podcast. Shoot me an email, podcast@sonicscoop.com. I love to hear your feedback. Remember to like and subscribe and hit that notifications bell if you're on YouTube to get notified whenever a new episode of the podcast comes out. And if you like the audio version, you can get us on iTunes, Google Play, Spotify. Please remember to rate and review. It really does help spread the word about this podcast. I hope this episode has been useful for you. This has been Justin Colletti of Sonic Scoop. Thanks for hanging out with me. See you next time.